It's been over a year since the release of The Rise of Skywalker, a film that marks the end of the sequel trilogy. And since then, there's been many a debate about whether or not this latest trilogy in the Star Wars franchise is any good. So that's what we're going to get into today. I'm going to talk about things that I like, things that I didn't, and I'm going to try to come to some sort of conclusion about this latest trilogy. So with that said, let's get into this. The first entry into the sequel trilogy was 2015's The Force Awakens. I want to make one thing fairly clear from the start here. I'm a guy who enjoyed The Force Awakens. Not a perfect movie by any means, but I was happy with the direction that these films were heading. With that said, I'm aware that a lot of people dislike this film and feel like it's just a rehash of A New Hope. But I was always of the opinion that it wouldn't matter if The Force Awakens was, quote, a rehash, because the next two films would give us something new and expand the world. And before we get into The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, I just want to quickly tackle the issue of, is The Force Awakens a rehash of A New Hope? Listen, there's definitely comparisons that can be made between the two films, but in my personal opinion, in 2015, I didn't leave the theatre thinking that I just watched a remake of A New Hope. You have to remember, it had been 10 years since the last Star Wars film. I genuinely did believe that it was a great reintroduction to the world. If anything, it plays more like a greatest hits than a rehash. In all honesty, I don't actually have a lot to say about The Force Awakens. I enjoyed it at the time and I thought it set this new trilogy off on the right path. It didn't do anything too offensive, at least for me, and I left the theatre like, great, looking forward to the next installment. And that's when this trilogy really takes a turn. 2017's The Last Jedi. I'm going to be honest with you here. The Last Jedi fucked everything up. And I don't mean that in the sense that The Last Jedi is a terrible movie. I actually don't think The Last Jedi is a bad movie at all. And we'll get to that in a sec, but what I actually mean is The Last Jedi messed everything up in the sense that everybody clearly had expectations about how they thought this trilogy was going to go. And The Last Jedi went out there to subvert all of those expectations. For good or for bad, you know, it's pretty obvious that's what happened when you watch the film. Now, in 2017, when I left the theatre, it was the first time in I don't know how long that I'd left the movie theatre not knowing how I felt about a film. I actually saw The Last Jedi in the perfect circumstances as well. Me and a couple of friends went late on a Sunday night and there was actually nobody in the theatre with us. So it was just me and my friends in there watching The Last Jedi. I actually saw all three of these films with pretty much the same people more or less. But the point I'm trying to make is the first time I watched The Last Jedi, I was confused about how I felt about it. Which is weird for me because I usually know instantly whether or not I like a film. For instance, when I left The Force Awakens, I knew I liked the movie enough to care about where the series went next. I thought the next movie will be about Luke and training Rey, we'll get some answers about who Snoke is, we'll get some answers about who Rey's parents are. I thought I knew where the train was heading, until I didn't. And then all of a sudden, everything that I thought was going to happen didn't happen, or at least not in the way I pictured. And for that, after I watched The Last Jedi, a part of me felt unsatisfied. And if the aim of the film was to take everything that we knew about Star Wars and flip it on its head, I'd say they did a pretty good job. Not because it didn't give us what we thought we were going to get, but for almost laughing at us for thinking it was going to be so straightforward. And with that, I'm going to talk about some things that happened in this film that turned out to be pretty big turning points for the trilogy and definitely contributed to how this trilogy turned out. Okay, so first up, the characterization of Luke Skywalker. Now, this is something a lot of people have made videos about, so I'm not going to harp on about it too much. But what I will say is this. Rian Johnson's interpretation, to be blunt about it, just doesn't feel like the same character. Even Mark Hamill thinks so.
I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker. Who is this guy? How did the most optimistic, hopeful character in the galaxy turn into this hermit who says it's time for the Jedi to end? I read that and I said, what? I mean, that's not what a Jedi does. I mean, a Jedi is optimistic. A Jedi has tenacity. He never gives up. He doesn't secrete himself on an island. But
now, the counter-argument to this is usually something along the lines of, oh, he's damaged, there's been some time, he's changed. And listen, I don't really feel like that argument holds up. And here's why. Luke tries to kill Ben Solo. I don't think in a million years Luke would try to kill Han Solo's son. Even his father, who at this point was the worst piece of shit in the galaxy, Luke still thought he could change him.
Feel the conflict within you, let go of your hate.
It is too late for me, son.
So no, I don't think Luke would try and kill his nephew. I disagree with that choice on all levels. Okay, so when this next moment happened, me and my friend literally turned to each other and said, what the fuck? I genuinely thought that they were going to kill Leia here, and since Carrie Fisher's no longer with us, it would make sense for her character to bow out in the films. And the music gets kind of emotional as well, but nope, she's floating through space looking like Mary fucking Poppins. I'm actually not finished with this point, I'm going to come back to it later, so let's just put a pin in it for now. The death of Snoke. In my opinion, the Emperor was not in the plans for this trilogy from the beginning. As much as J.J. Abrams will tell you that he was, I would bet my house on the fact that he wasn't. Again, we'll come back to this later, but absolutely nowhere. So, to summarise what went down in The Last Jedi, and I by no means have any inside information here, I'm merely coming to my own conclusions, but I think Rian Johnson really wanted to subvert the expectations, but it may have had a detrimental effect on this trilogy as a whole. Now, back to the Carrie Fisher point. She probably was planned to be in all three of these movies. That doesn't take away from the fact that she's no longer with us. It probably wasn't the right thing to do having her in The Rise of Skywalker, at least in my opinion. Now don't get me wrong, I love Carrie Fisher, we all do, but in my opinion The Last Jedi was a missed opportunity to give her a real hero send-off. I actually think that the Holdo moment, that should have gone to Leia. You know, Holdo was a new character, it wouldn't really have mattered if she'd had that heroic save anyways, so you could have given that heroic moment to Leia, and she could have had a really heroic send-off, and since she's passed in real life, she could go out as a hero. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section below, guys. So, my final thoughts on The Last Jedi. As a film by itself, I actually think it does a lot of cool stuff, but it also does some things that affect this trilogy, in my opinion, in a negative way. It makes some choices that directly affect The Rise of Skywalker specifically. And speaking of The Rise of Skywalker, let's get into the biggest problems of this film. And just so we're clear, The Force Awakens was that it could be deemed a rehash of A New Hope. With The Last Jedi, it tries too hard to subvert expectations. And with The Rise of Skywalker, it's basically just damage control from the reaction that The Last Jedi got. And again, these aren't necessarily my thoughts. I actually like all three of these films on an individual basis, but these three films do not work as a trilogy in my opinion. A trilogy works best when there's one story being told over three films. For example, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. That's one story being told over three films, and that story does not change film to film, and that's what makes it such a great trilogy. The Force Awakens does the least harm in that respect. It sets up some plot points, and then The Last Jedi takes almost everything that the first film set up and changes it, and then The Rise of Skywalker comes in and essentially tries to put us back on the same tracks that The Force Awakens set up. And another point that I actually want to make clear about these films is that I shouldn't have to read a prequel comic book or anything like that to understand the characters or to understand what's going on in these films. Everything that I need to know about these films should be in the films. Now, I want to circle back round to the Snoke point. The Emperor returns in this film, and it's not really explained how in the movie, but he's back, and it's basically because Rian Johnson killed Snoke, which is a bold move. I respect that move by Rian Johnson. It's definitely a bold move, of course it is. But like I've said previously, there was no plans for that to happen, so it messed up whatever was going to come after it. And I genuinely do think that J.J. Abrams thought, I'll set this up, I'll set that up, and this can be carried on in the next film, but Rian Johnson has looked at that and said, well, I don't really want to do that, so I'm just going to do my own thing, and then whoever comes next to do the third film can fix that or do whatever they want with that. And like I said, there's no overarching story. Again, in The Last Jedi, Kylo Ren tells Rey that she comes from nobody, there's no amazing family revelation, but then in The Rise of Skywalker, it turns out she's a Palpatine. Another point that needs to be made is the Knights of Ren. They were set up to look really cool in The Force Awakens, they weren't used in The Last Jedi, and they're barely used in The Rise of Skywalker. What's the point of them even being in these films? The throne room battle in The Last Jedi, couldn't you have just put them in there instead of Snoke's guards? My biggest gripe with The Rise of Skywalker is that J.J. Abrams is trying to pick up threads from different films. He's trying to continue stuff that happened in The Force Awakens while also trying to attach it to stuff that happened in The Last Jedi, and it doesn't really work. So, when we come down to the question, is the sequel trilogy bad? Yeah, it is. The individual films I don't have a problem with. You either like them or you don't. But as a trilogy that's supposed to be telling the same story, they're just not all reading from the same book. They're trying their hardest to, but they're just not. J.J. Abrams made his film, Ryan came on and did his bit, then Colin Trevorrow was supposed to come in and do the third one, but then obviously he was fired, and then J.J. had to come in and finish the trilogy. But obviously the film that was made wouldn't have been the film that J.J. Abrams would have made if he was penciled in to do the third installment from the beginning. The movie that was made was clearly a reaction to what happened in The Last Jedi. The films on an individual basis aren't bad, they're very well made, but the trilogy as a whole, when you take a step back and look at it, is just a mess, and that's the simplest way I can put it. Now obviously I'm casting quite a broad net. I don't want to sit here and dissect every little problem with each film, because we could talk about this forever. You know, I could say this should have happened or this should have happened, but my opinion doesn't really matter, and you know, there's no use in doing that. These are the films that we've got now. But to end this on a lighter note, I think that Star Wars is about eras. And this is going to be some people's era of Star Wars. I grew up in the prequel era, and I've had to listen to people destroy those films. And I just want to talk about this for a quick second, because if somebody comes up to me and says that they love everything about the sequel trilogy, I am by no means going to tell them that they're wrong or destroy them for that. You know, you like what you like, and that's great. If you like these films, I'm happy for you. And actually, this leads into next week's video. I'm going to be talking about the Attack of the Clones next week, because I've got some pretty strong opinions about that film. For now, I'd really want to start a discussion in the comment section below, so let me know what you think about the sequel trilogy. I'll be replying to everyone, and also feel free to check out some of the other videos on my channel. I've got a series that I recently started about the Lord of the Rings and how those films got made. I also cover Marvel, DC, Star Wars, and all that cool stuff, so if any of that sounds good to you, make sure you hit subscribe. Don't forget to comment below this video and leave a like, because I will be doing my best to respond to everyone. Leave a like to let me know you enjoyed it, and then I can do some more stuff like this. And of course, thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.